COVID-19 has given us an opportunity to consider life as we know it or knew it. One of those things for many of us as parents has been education, and for some it's become a real thorn in the flesh. It's the bedrock of society, one on which we build the next generation. And if COVID-19 has opened your eyes to the world of education for the next generation, you really don't want to miss today's show with our education maverick, Jim Baker. Don't go away. We'll be right back. If you're just joining us, welcome to the show. I'm your host, Brigitte Limbanda from Cape Town in South Africa. Does the mere thought of education send you reeling at the moment? Some say, like with many other things, education calls for out-of-the-box thinking. But our guest today believes out-of-the-box thinking is still boxing us in, and we literally need to kick out the box completely and flip education on its head. We'll have him back, join us on the show in a moment. But first of all, let me say hello to my amazing co-host, Viola Manuel. Viola, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brigitte. I am so looking forward to hearing about how we should just be kicking this box to the curb. I started my career as an educator, and it's been amazing. It's one of those things where you get skills that just help you through. Especially with business, just being able to analyze things and being able to prepare and so on. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. And of course, being in the throw of it in terms of having to, just have Shay at home and have him doing school from home. And so many of my colleagues and friends just spitting fire, because they just can't get around this thing. So I know that there's going to be lots of value coming out of today's show. So I'm keen to meet with Jim.
Absolutely. There's one thing I see in my feed constantly, that I see on Twitter constantly. It's people talking about the education sector and how things need to change because it's not working as it currently is. And so as an introduction to Jim, he is an education maverick with a passion to repair the nonsense many call education, he says. He is a 100 Ambassador, which is a thriving global community of education stakeholders passionate about bringing change through innovation. Jim trains educationalists worldwide on flipped learning and cloud computing. He is a board member of the Virtual World Education and a freelance consultant with a Real World Education Group. Jim is also a digital champion volunteer and a member of the Global Advisory Board for Next Generation Global Education. He's also an honorary member of the ISNF Foundation, whose aim it is to enhance teaching creativity and innovation in the 21st century classroom. So I think that there is absolutely no doubt that to talk about education, Jim is our man. So let's invite him to the show, shall we? And with that, Jim, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Brigitte and Viola. Lovely to meet you, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.
Well, we are very excited to have you on the show, and all the research we've done has just underlined why it is that we absolutely need to talk to you. The circumstances we find ourselves in South Africa is we've just been, experiencing level 3 of our lockdown, which means that some of our kids have started going back to school. But the amazing thing is, it was broken before COVID. Our education system was thoroughly criticized for just not working and not delivering, the kind of product that we need for our kids. But before we get into that discussion, let's get to know you a little bit. On Tuesday, South Africa celebrated Youth Day, which has lots of political, importance for us. But what's very important is that we've been asking all our guests to just tell us a little bit about your youth, because it would be interesting to know a little bit more about you growing up. Tell us a little bit about your youth, Jim, please.
Starting at what age?
From the time you can remember. How's that?
Well, I lived in a small village, and in fact, we didn't have electricity until I was 9.
Wow.
I passed the 11 plus for grammar school, and one person, it happened, funnily enough, one person passed every 7 years for the grammar school.
Wow.
And in those days, there were log tables. By the time I was in the 6th form, we managed to have a wooden slide rule. But of course, there were still no computers. I went to university in 1970. No, the long-term memory is going now. In 1966, I went to university. I started teaching in 1970, and I retired in 2008.
Okay.
Is that enough?
No, go ahead.
And then I thought that was it. I gave all my books away. And in 2009, I was asked to do some supply work, which I did. Then the head of the science department at the school I went back to asked me if I wanted to earn a bit of cash. So because 50% of maths and science teachers pack up within 3 years, that in itself, what does it tell you about the education system? So the government set up this starting out scheme where they commandeered 50 teachers nationwide to act as online mentors.
Okay.
So I applied for this and got taken on. I was then, somebody spotted about chemistry, and I was invited to make some GCSE videos. There were, 5, 6, 7 chemists worldwide making these videos, and another of the chemists, Keith Ross, he lived in the south of France. He'd written 3 editions of Teaching Secondary Science, and he wanted to update it for the 21st century. So he asked me if I'd be interested in writing a chapter on harnessing the power of technology and the web, which I did.
Great.
So everything's taken off since I retired.
Oh, that's the way to do it. That's the way to do it.
So what made you want to become an educator, Jim? Was it something you always wanted to do since you were little, or did some thought process go into that?
When I was at school, I wanted to be a lawyer, but somebody came to the school, a lawyer, to give advice, and I was told I wouldn't be able to be a lawyer because I was taking the wrong subjects at A level, which I now realise that I could have been a lawyer. But having said that, I went on to do chemistry. A big influence was the deputy head of the school, who was my mentor, but I didn't fancy being stuck in a lab. He told me that his friends that went into the chemical industry looked a lot older than he did and had a lot more hassle than he did in teaching. I think the roles are reversed now. But when I just fished out this testimonial from the warden of the hall I was in, and it says, knowing him as well as I do, he has the capacity to instill his enthusiasm and to convey his knowledge to others, and I feel sure he will make a first-class teacher. I have no hesitation whatsoever in commending Mr. Baker to you for your most serious consideration.
Well done.
So I think it's the passion to be with people and to pass on knowledge.
Yeah, and it's so important, the role that teachers play in inspiring you to, make your career decisions. It's become more and more clear to me that teachers do more than just stand in front of the classroom and teach. Many of them, the way they engage with kids actually leaves kids inspired and motivated.
Yes, I mean, if there was one word I'd like to get rid of from the English dictionary, is teacher. Because that implies you stand there and what I call force feeding.
Yeah.
Which many teachers do.
Yeah. Jim, in terms of that, what do you perceive to be some of the greatest challenges with the current system today? Now, I know that each country has a different, there's differences in terms of the way they implement the education system. But just generally, your general observations, what do you think are some of the greatest challenges with the current education system?
The greatest challenges are that the people that make the decisions, the people that pull the purse strings, are clueless on essentially how I work. So they fear what they do not understand.
Okay. That makes sense.
I mean, I actually did an online form about education being run by people that are clueless. A lot of the Ofsted inspectors that come in, they have never taught. So how can you judge somebody on something that you've had no experience on?
That's very much I think it's interesting. I think that's a global issue that a lot of the ministers.
It is a global issue that I think teaching, the decision makers in education should be the people that know about it, and they're the people not in offices telling people what to do, but the people that are actually doing it.
I think, in almost every sector, that is the problem when it comes to education. You end up with what you call textbook teachers.
Yes.
They don't really know anything about the subject they're teaching. They're literally teaching from a book, which is really not where we want to go. And so you've been called a pioneer and a maverick. What does that mean for you?
Well, a maverick is one of independent thought and actions. So a maverick does what he or she believes is right, which often goes against convention.
Okay.
And so what are some of the innovative things that you've been able to implement in the education sector? And how have you used that to change the way that children perceive learning and are being taught? How do you do it differently?
Right. Way back in the 80s, before computers, I was standing at the front of my class one day and thought, what a waste of time, me giving them information. So I wrote out the course and I would actually print out notes for future lessons so that I gave them to the students beforehand. So when they arrived at the lesson, they came prepared and were ready to ask me questions on the work that they'd read. So the whole lesson was spent not me giving them information, because they can get that on their own, but actually answering their questions and helping them with questions that they would normally be given to do at home.
Well, that's a very innovative approach. So, so Jim, what is flipped learning? Because that's a term that's been associated with you and the work that you do and the innovative, your innovative thinking. What exactly is it? If you had to define it for somebody, what is flipped learning?
Yes, so essentially flipped learning is doing at home what is normally done at school and doing at school what is normally done at home. So at school, the students acquire the information. But now in flipped learning, they acquire that information at home. And an advantage is if a teacher is showing a PowerPoint in class and the students do not understand, they can't keep asking the teacher to replay the PowerPoint. But if they're watching the PowerPoint at home, they can replay as many times as they like until they understand it.
Okay.
Secondly, again, conventionally, students are given a homework sheet. They're given all the same questions to do at home. The student that gets stuck on question 2, there is nobody to ask because the parents aren't subject specialists. They lose interest. Their enthusiasm goes. They get into the class and this follows them into the class. Whereas on flipped learning, they are given tasks that they can manage, like watching a video, watching an animation. So they will do the prep, whereas they would not do the homework. So what I say to my students is, you should not be doing anything in this valuable hour in class with me that you don't need me for, that you can do on your own, i.e. access all the information. And also, I shouldn't be doing anything with you that a non-specialist could do, i.e. just put PowerPoints on the board or show you videos.
Okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, what flipped learning is actually doing is it's actually encouraging more interaction, and it's actually encouraging curiosity and more exploration in terms of the subject matter.
Absolutely, because many teachers like to ask the questions because they have prepared the answers beforehand, but they're often not what the students want to do. The students, you can see them wanting to ask questions, but the teacher tells them to be quiet because they feel threatened when asked questions that they may struggle with. Whereas in the flipped learning, it's the students that's asking all the questions that they want answers to because they're curious.
Okay.
So opposed
they're far more enthusiastic.
So as opposed to children being in a classroom where the teacher is paraphrasing information out of a textbook or from a PowerPoint, you're saying, let's not waste the teacher's time, let's not waste the children's time. Let's get them, if this is just stuff that's being read from a textbook, do that at home, do the research at home, come back and then ask me your questions once you've got all the information. So it's getting them to develop more critical thinking, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. Now, Jim, just let me give you a little bit of background about the South African situation. We still sit with a culture in South Africa where it's about children are seen and not heard. Our kids are not encouraged to question. Our kids are not encouraged. I'm talking generally. I'm being a sort of I'm speaking for the majority of kids. They are not taught to question. They are taught to sit quietly and absorb and listen. And then the second challenge that we have is that many of our kids find themselves living in a shack with about 10 other people. So, the opportunity to sit down in a conducive environment and learn and read the base work so that they can generate that level of curiosity and questioning. It's not exactly the easiest thing for the majority of our kids.
So it's an uphill struggle all the time.
Excuse me, Jim, I didn't hear that.
It's an uphill struggle all the time.
Yes, yes, and there's very little access to the internet. Now, within that context, because that's the real context for South African educators. Within that context, what aspects, if not all of the aspects, but which aspects of flipped learning would then work in that context?
Now, when I was involved in making the GCSE videos, they were built or made with the African countries in mind, because the guy that started the project, he actually went to Africa to promote it, because the videos are deliberately designed to last only 2 to 7 minutes. They do not use a lot of bandwidth, unlike the Khan Academy videos that can last an hour. So all you need is, because it's all online, you don't need to download any software to machines, so it can be accessed by any device that can access the internet.
Okay,
but
so
where the Wi-Fi, this is a problem. This is why the infrastructure, it should be a top priority of every country in this day and age, because the internet is used for everything, whether it's for getting in touch with your family in Australia, whether it's for online shopping, whether it's for getting help from the local council. That I feel that every village should have a digital champion to train not just the old people, but everybody, how to make the most of the internet.
there's within the education department and the education system, there's a huge movement now for us to start seeing the access to the internet as a right and not a privilege. It's the right of every South African to have access to the internet. And until we actually understand the power of that right, we are going to always be sort of finding ourselves 2 steps back when we could have been 3 steps forward. Jim, just in terms of the flipped learning and the cultural issue, in terms of kids not asking questions, how would you deal with that?
I think it's up to people like myself to actually have a video chat with the head teachers, with the people that run education in the different countries, and just to actually show them. Because you can talk about something, but as with Bridgetta the other day on the computer, I could actually share my screen and actually show her how I actually worked and what access my students have. So hopefully when the teachers, the top people in running education, have it explained to them and actually see for themselves by sharing my screen, they will see it differently. And
Okay.
I trained a school in Cyprus in 2014, and about 1.5 years ago, I had a letter from the head teacher saying they were skeptical to start with. It meant hard work because you have to have all the material prepared online. But she said now they're seeing the benefits. The children are more enthused. The parents are actually getting involved. They're actually asking questions in class where they'd all normally just be sitting there taking things in. They were actually taking a big part of the lesson. So, and it ended up thanking me for introducing them to flipped learning. And that was a private school that took students from ages 2 to 18. So it can be applied to any level and any subject, because it's just flipping round what you do. But the more you can get students involved in their education, they are far more enthused. I mean, when I I only teach the sixth form at the school I'm at the moment. I just do 1 day a week because I'm an old man. I can't manage any more than that. But what the sixth form students always say is, why couldn't we have worked like this lower down, sir?
No.
So definitely, I think we need to move towards more innovation in this space. And I think I really like, the more I'm listening to you explain what flipped learning is about. And of course, to be honest, prior to us having the show, I didn't quite get what you mean by flipped learning, but now it makes sense. In other words, it's just switching around the way that we think of teaching and making it more useful to the learners and developing their critical thinking skills.
Entertaining. When yes, when people ask what I do, I say I'm an entertainer. In fact, a colleague of mine 20 years ago wrote in my guest book, he said, are you still blurring the boundaries between teaching and entertaining?
I love that. I love that.
A lot of people say it is no good knowing your subject well if you cannot explain it. But I go further. It is no good being able to explain it if your audience isn't receptive. So the first thing is to get your audience receptive, and that's what entertainers do.
Yeah.
That is absolutely true. Do you think, though, that flipped learning can also be applied at university level?
Absolutely. I'll always remember, in fact, when I was at university, there was one lad, he actually asked a question to the lecturer, and the lecturer said, shut up, I'm giving the lecture. That was at university.
Yeah, but you see, Jim, that raises a very important aspect that I think our educators would have to overcome, is the fact that a lot of them seem to understand that when they move away from this chalk and talk methodology and they move to a more facilitated methodology, they feel that they lose a little bit of control. They feel that they lose a little bit of the sort of power base that shouldn't even exist in a classroom, but does.
On that point, Yola, I'm sure a lot of people go into teaching because it feels it gives them some sort of control over people.
This is true. And then in South Africa, we also sit with a situation where a lot of our educators should not be in that profession at all. They sort of went for the education profession because with apartheid, there were very few opportunities for people of color in terms of professional opportunities. So teaching was one of them, nursing was another. So lots of our people sort of went, South Africans went into those spaces, and not because they felt passionately about it or it's something that they were dying to do. It was just, those were the limited options they had. And then what happened with the democratic government coming in place, lots of our training schools were closed down and merged. And so there wasn't this school that just focused on educating kids and working and teaching kids. It was a watered down version of what we had in the past. So there's a lot about our system that has failed our children. There's a lot about our system that has failed our educators as well. So that's why it's important to understand the context of South Africa. But having said that, I still think flipped learning is an awesome response to the chaos.
It is. I mean, the school knows that I will argue if the inspectors come in, and they threaten to send me home. And in fact, what I regard an inspector coming into school with his or her tick list and judging how I work. I equate that to a football referee trying to umpire a cricket match. It's an entirely different game.
Mm. Mm.
That kind of really puts it into perspective. Jim, if you had to say something to the educators out there who are currently not using the flipped learning method, what would you be saying to them?
I think a lot would like to use it, but they are governed by what the school says. And unlike myself, who is retired, they are in fear of losing their jobs. And they are under pressure to abide by the system, otherwise they would lose the jobs. And this is a major problem. I just wish the other teachers were given the freedom that I'm given, because I tell them that if I am not allowed to work as I want to work and know that works based on 50 years at the chalk face, not in an office, then I will not work at your school.
So really we need to look at an approach where this is managed top down, but I would imagine that the initiative for change needs to be bottom up.
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, people seem far more receptive abroad, because I've been asked to open a project in Kazakhstan to help to introduce distant and online learning, whereas in this country, everybody is afraid of losing the job. But in South Africa, do presumably teachers have to go through a training course?
They do. They do.
And presumably that is they have to do essays, etc., on education.
They do. They do.
Now, here they do. Trainee teachers in the first year, they're observed. They have to do essays. They have to meet this tick list. Yet 50% are still packing up after 3 years. And when I train some students, I ask them how much of this year's training or the essays, etc., you have to do, how does that fit you to when you're actually in the classroom in front of the students? And they said not at all. I compare that with my first year in teaching. Well, in my trainee year, before I actually went into a school, we were showing this video, and there was this teacher come into the classroom. It was short, about my height. The students were making a noise. He was doing this for about 5 minutes to no avail. Then the video cut. This big rugby guy came into the room, slammed the door, deadly hush. So this teaching job, it's easy. So when I went into my first class from the prep room, the students, in fact, they were quiet because they were summing up, who's this young lad here with short trousers that's come to teach us chemistry? So I thought, I'm determined to try this slamming the door. So I went back into the prep room, waited till they started making a noise, went back into the classroom, slammed the door, and some glassware fell off a shelf above the door. I mean, that says it all. You can't go on a course and then come back, oh, I know it all now. And in fact, putting things in perspective, these teachers that have to do all this, what I call unnecessary work, to qualify to be a teacher, and not many last after 3-4 years. In my first year, actually in the classroom, I was observed once by my head of department, who was a tall guy, 6'3", red hair, and it was after a practical lesson, and there was a bit of water on the bench about the size of my thumbnail, and he looked at that, and he tapped on the bench and looked at me and said, "We don't like to see this here, lad." So I, no, sir. He called me lad for 3 years. I had to call him sir. And then that's the only time I was observed. And at the end of that year, the science advisor came. My head of department was Don Ainley. And the science advisor came and said, "Don, this new lad you've got for chemistry, what do you think?" So Don said, he said, "It's a bit short. He struggles to reach the bottles on the top shelves, but I think he'll be all right." And 50 years later, I'm still all right.
Yeah.
Jim, we're out of time. I want to thank you so much for joining us.
No,
and I think,
thank you for letting me to sort of put my views to a lot of people.
Thank you.
It's a big pleasure. And I think the one thing we've learned from you tonight is we need to end the tick box learning. And we definitely need to embrace we need to embrace a better way of educating our young people. Jim, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who's joined us this evening. Have a great evening further. Stay safe, and we'll see you again tomorrow night. Take care, everyone. Goodbye from us.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.